I started hearing the piano again 3 weeks ago. Not from my living room. Mine hasn't been tuned in years. No, this sound comes when the house is quiet, when the walls feel thin and the air tastes like memory. It plays just one song, the same melody every night, soft as breath, blue as rain. I don't know where I learned it or who I wrote it for, but sometimes in the silence between notes, I swear I hear a man's voice calling my name, a name I no longer recognize. Day 1, Monday, light rain. I played a nameless piece, but it felt familiar. The tape recorder clicked softly after the sentence, its spinning reels continuing in a soft whir, catching the quiet between waves. Eleanor paused, watching the rain move across the window in small, slanted slashes. The world outside her cottage blurred, the ocean folding into the sky, clouds sitting low, like a memory just out of reach. She rewound the tape a few seconds and played it back. Day 1, Monday, light rain. Her voice on tape sounded smaller, like it belonged to someone else entirely. She sighed, pressed stop, and leaned back into the wooden chair, the same one she had sat in for years. Her knuckles hurt. They always did in the rain, but they moved without her thinking, tracing the rim of the old teacup on the table. She'd read somewhere that talking aloud could delay memory loss, that recording yourself daily could help preserve something. Names, places, feelings. The woman on the podcast had said, "Don't trust the brain. It's a lovely liar." So Eleanor bought a tape recorder from a secondhand store in town. Not digital, but with real spools and tiny buttons that clicked like ticking time. She didn't want to keep photos. She didn't want videos. She didn't trust the mirror anymore. But sound stayed, echoed, came back. She stood slowly, the chair creaking beneath her, and walked toward the piano by the window. It was out of tune, terribly so, but she still played. She always had. Tuesday. The wind changed direction. Eleanor noticed that, not because she watched the trees, there were none near her little house on the cliff, but because the waves crashed differently against the rocks this morning. She sat by the recorder again, unspooling a new cassette. Day 2, Tuesday. The wind sounds wrong today, like it forgot where it's supposed to go. She stopped, frowned, rewound, and played it back. The sound of the wind crept in through the open window. The rain had passed. Now the sea smelled brinier, sharper, hungrier. In the corner, a kettle clicked off. She didn't get up right away. Her fingers stayed on the recorder. Then she whispered something else into the mic. "I didn't call Clara today." She didn't say why, didn't need to. The recorder wasn't her daughter. It didn't ask questions. Clara used to call every evening, then every week. Now it was once or twice in 2 or 3. Eleanor pretended she was fine with that, pretended she preferred silence. She made tea, black, no sugar. It always tasted better when the wind was strong. That night, she dreamed of the man again. Not clearly, not fully. He never showed his full face, just a silhouette, backlit by something warm, like a fireplace or sunset behind foggy curtains. She could see the outline of his hair, his shoulders. But most of all, she heard his voice. Warm, steady, slightly amused like he knew something she didn't. He sat next to her on the piano bench, played something low, something that made the floor feel like it breathed. "Play it again," he said. She turned toward him, but the dream pulled her somewhere else. A hallway, a beach, a photograph of two people laughing, their faces scratched out by time. She woke up before she could see the whole picture. Day 3, Wednesday. The piano sounded better today. She had tuned it. At least she tried. There were notes that would never quite fall in line anymore, like teeth too loose to chew. Eleanor recorded the sound of the keys. Then she pressed play and walked to the kitchen, letting the music follow her. That night, the man spoke again. But this time, he said her name. Not Eleanor, but something else. Len. Just Len. It didn't feel wrong. It felt other. She turned to look at him, her dream self sharper now. She could smell salt on his jacket, could see his fingers on the keys, long, thin fingers with small freckles across the knuckles. She knew those hands. He said, "I missed you." Then the dream collapsed, the way dreams do, sudden, cruel, unfinished. She didn't sleep again that night. Instead, she walked barefoot to the piano and placed her hand on the wood. It was warm. Not from the fire, she hadn't lit one, but from something inside. She sat, played one note, then another, then stopped.
Day 4, Thursday. I dreamed of someone I think I knew. He called me Len. I haven't heard that name since... Another pause. Too long. Eleanor's voice on tape wavered, like wind behind a closed door. She rewound and listened again. The same pause, the same missing name. She spent the morning combing through old drawers. There were journals, half-written, receipts, a letter from Clara, age 12, apologizing for breaking the teacup with the lilies. And then, in a blue envelope with no return address, a black and white photograph. 2 people, a woman, younger, her hair in waves, laughing with her mouth wide open. A man beside her, tall, wearing a loose shirt, looking sideways at her like she was the whole world. Their hands were interlocked. They were both barefoot. No names. On the back, in faint pencil, the only music we ever needed. Eleanor stared at it for a long time, then set it on the piano. That night, she didn't dream. She waited for him, but he didn't come. Day 5, Friday. It's quiet. Even the sea sounds like it's holding its breath. She played the tape back, listening for signs of herself, for what she wasn't saying. The tape didn't lie, but it didn't explain either. She played the piano, the same chord she'd heard in her dreams, D minor, E flat, F sharp. Then she said, not into the recorder, but into the empty room, "Who are you?" The house didn't answer, but a gull screamed outside, and that was something. That evening, Clara called. Eleanor let it ring 3 times before picking up. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was stiff, formal, careful. "Clara," Eleanor said. A pause. "Just calling to check in. Everything okay?" "I started recording myself," Eleanor replied. Clara was quiet for a second. "Like, with video?" "No, audio. Just sounds. My voice, the ocean, the piano." "That's good," Clara said, too quickly. "I dreamed of your father." Clara inhaled sharply. "Mom, he played piano. I remembered that." "He didn't," Clara said. Eleanor's lips tightened. "He hated music. You said so, remember?" Eleanor looked over at the photograph. "I don't think I did," she whispered. Clara didn't answer for a long time. Then, "Okay, I'll call again on Sunday." She hung up. Day 6, Saturday. There's a photograph on the piano. I don't know who's in it, but it makes me feel like I was someone else once. She played the tape back, then added, "I think that version of me liked to dance barefoot." She sat by the window, the photograph in her lap, and watched the sea until her eyes ached. That night, the man came back. He sat beside her on the bench again. "You kept the photo," he said. She nodded. "It's been a long time," he added. "I don't remember you," she whispered. "I know." He placed his hand over hers on the keys. Their fingers matched. "You called me Len," she said. "I always did." He smiled. She tried to ask more, where they met, who he was, what had happened, but the dream began to dissolve. The last thing she heard before waking was a note. Just one. Soft. Low. Day 7, Sunday. I think I know him, but I can't remember meeting him. Her voice on the tape caught. A small hitch. Then, nothing. The reels spun for a while in silence. She set the photograph on the windowsill beside a small pot of lavender. The sea outside moved slowly now, like it too had grown tired. Eleanor sat at the piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Then she pressed the first note again, the same one from her dream. The sound drifted upward, through her rafters, through her bones. She closed her eyes, let the note linger, let it stay. I didn't sleep much after the dream. My body felt slow, as if something heavy had been sewn into my bones. But it wasn't pain, it was more like a strange ache, a longing that had no shape. Tuesday. The sky outside was pale gray, the kind of sky that makes the world feel like it's holding its breath. I sat in the kitchen with my tea, staring at the steam until it curled into nothing. I didn't press record on the tape right away. Instead, I picked up a pen. It was odd how stiff my fingers felt. I hadn't written anything longhand in a while. Most things now were typed, when they had to be done at all. But something told me this needed to be written, not spoken. Words from a place too fragile for voice. I wrote just one word, Andrew. I underlined it once, then again. The name from the dream. The name the man at the piano had said, soft and certain, like a secret passed between lovers. But he hadn't said it to himself. He said it to me. That part I remembered clearly. Except it wasn't my name. Not the one I remembered answering to, anyway. Still, it fit like an old coat. One you'd forgotten, but still knew the smell of. I folded the page and slipped it into the back of my recipe book. That's where I put things I wanted to remember, which lately had been more and more. Later, that morning, I asked Lucy. She had come by to bring groceries. I didn't ask her to. She just did, the way daughters do when they feel guilty for something they can't name. "Lucy," I said as she stacked canned soup into my cupboard, "do we know anyone named Andrew?" She paused, looked up. "Andrew?" "Yes, Andrew." I tried not to make my voice sound too eager or too scared. She tilted her head. "I don't think so, no. No one in the family. Not from Dad's side either. Why?" I lied. "Just a name that came to mind." She narrowed her eyes. She was always too sharp for her own good. "From one of your old books?" I shrugged. "Maybe." She said nothing more, just returned to her cans, but I could tell she was unsettled. I almost told her about the dream, about the music, about how my hands, without thought, played notes I didn't know I remembered. But I didn't. Because the truth was, I wasn't sure if I was remembering or becoming someone else. That afternoon, I walked to the market. It wasn't far, just 3 blocks past the oak-lined path. I liked the walk. It cleared the static in my mind. The breeze carried sea salt from the east, and the sidewalks were cracked in just the right places, familiar under my feet. At the market, I browsed for apples, red ones, never green. I wasn't paying attention to much else until it came on, the soft, distinct trill of a nocturne, bleeding from the speaker near the bakery aisle. Chopin. I stopped. My heart did too. It wasn't just that I recognized the piece. It was that I had heard it before, somewhere deeper than memory. My throat tightened. My hands began to tremble, and then the tears came, quiet, sudden, unreasonable. I dropped the apples, let them roll across the linoleum like marbles. I didn't care. Someone asked if I was all right. I nodded, waved them off, but inside, something had broken loose, something I had buried, or that had been buried for me. I walked home without buying anything. That night, I couldn't sleep. The moonlight spilled across the floor in long silver ribbons, and my skin prickled with the electricity of something unfinished. I sat at the old piano. I hadn't opened it in months, years maybe. It still smelled like dust and polish and faint traces of lavender. I ran my fingers along the edge, feeling for the memory. And then I opened the lid. The keys were ivory, worn at the corners. My hands hovered. Then they moved. Not with effort, not with thought, with instinct. Note after note, the melody came back. Not like a memory, no. It was in my muscles, in my bones. I didn't just know the song. I had lived it. It was the same one from the market. But I hadn't learned Chopin in my youth. I had never taken lessons that far. Still, I played it perfectly.
My hands did not shake, not once. When it ended, I sat there in silence for what felt like hours. Then, without meaning to, I turned on the recorder again.
Day 2, Tuesday, evening. I walked today, and something followed me home. Not a person, not a sound, a feeling, a memory with no image. I played tonight, a piece I don't remember learning. My fingers knew it before I asked them to. Chopin, a nocturne. There was a name this morning. It came from the dream. Andrew. I asked Lucy. She didn't know him. But I do. I do. I just don't remember how. Andrew. En la I. I rewound that tape, played it back. I listened to my own voice say his name, the way it softened in my mouth, the way it cracked at the end. Something stirred in me when I heard it again, like hearing a lullaby you didn't know you knew. I remembered a laugh, a man's voice, warm like brandy in winter, a record spinning in a dim room, books stacked on the floor, music sheets pinned to the wall, and in the middle of it all, me. Not Eleanor, someone else. I paused the tape. I whispered to the dark, Andrew, who was I with you? The next morning, I found something strange. The sheet music, folded neatly and tucked beneath the piano bench, as though waiting. It was the Chopin piece, Nocturne in E minor, but it was marked. Pencil notations in the margins, small flourishes, a star beside a bar of notes, initials, A.M. Andrew, M. I touched the paper. It was old, yellowed slightly. But mine? No. The handwriting wasn't mine, and yet I had played it like it belonged to me. That day, I didn't speak to anyone. I just sat near the piano, staring at the score, listening to the sea breeze rustling the curtains, waiting, I think, for the past to arrive. But all I heard was silence, the kind that falls before a storm. That night, I dreamed again. The same man, the same room, but this time he wasn't playing. He was listening to me. I sat at the piano, younger, maybe, or just clearer in the face. He was across from me, elbow on the table, smiling the way someone does when watching a part of themselves live outside their body. "Play the bridge again," he said. "You always skip it when you're nervous." I laughed, and I called him by name. Andrew. I woke up crying, but not with sadness, with relief. Recording. Tape 3. Day 3. Wednesday. I dreamed again. This time, I was the one playing. He was listening. He smiled. I said his name aloud, Andrew. I called him that in the dream. I wasn't guessing anymore. I'm starting to think this isn't just memory loss. Maybe it's memory finding its way back. There's music in the house now. Again.
like someone came in and opened a window that had been stuck for years. I don't know what I'm becoming, but I know what I've missed. I think tomorrow I'll try something new. I'll write a letter. Not to Lucy, not even to myself, but to him, to Andrew, because something tells me he once did the same for me, and maybe his words are still here in a drawer, beneath the floorboard, in a piano key, waiting, like music, waiting to be played.
The dreams returned, only clearer now. It started with a flicker, soft candlelight, trembling on the edge of a shadow. Then the room expanded, warm and golden, with dusty beams stretching across a piano's glossy surface. Eleanor didn't remember walking into the room. She was simply there, as though she had always been there, sitting side by side with someone at the keys. They played together, the melody intertwining between their hands like ivy curling around a gate. It was an old upright piano, dark walnut, worn at the edges. Eleanor's fingers didn't shake here. They moved fluidly, like water flowing over stones. Each note bloomed and then faded, folding into the next. She wasn't watching the keys. She was watching him. The man beside her smiled softly, as if the song was something only they could hear properly. She laughed in the dream, a full laugh, not polite, not filtered. It startled her, the version of herself that existed in this room. Her skin was smoother, her hair longer. She wore a navy dress that felt like something from another time. But it wasn't the youth that caught her. It was the joy, that radiant, unfiltered joy. She hadn't seen it on her own face in years. The man turned slightly, his features still blurred, like a sketch unfinished, but his presence was undeniable. He smelled faintly of cedar and old books. "Eleanor," he said, not the same way her daughter said it, not like the mailman or the neighbor or the nurse at the clinic. He said it like it was a secret, a name he was still holding in his mouth after all this time. And then she woke up. Eleanor sat on the edge of her bed, eyes adjusting to the gray dawn pooling around her window. Rain had been falling steadily since early morning, tapping on the glass like fingernails. She didn't move for a while, only listened. Then she stood, barefoot, and walked slowly to the study. The old recorder sat on the desk. She pressed the red button. Day 14. Early morning. Dream again. Candlelight. A small room. He was there. We played together. I laughed. I didn't even know I could still laugh like that. She released the button and sat in silence. The rain filled the room with soft static. Later that afternoon, she went to dust the shelves in the guest bedroom, something she hadn't done in months. She wasn't expecting anything, just keeping her hands busy. But when she slid open the lowest drawer of an old mahogany chest, she found something tucked beneath a stock of yellowed newspapers. A music score, folded neatly, thick paper, slightly frayed at the corners. She pulled it out with trembling fingers. The title was written in elegant, slanted cursive. The Sound of Blue. Her breath caught. The name underneath it, A. Whitmore. She stared at the name for a long time. Her hands trembled, her throat tightened. She whispered, A. Whitmore? The paper fluttered as she moved to sit down. She didn't recognize the handwriting, but it felt known, like finding an old coat in the back of a closet and realizing it fits
perfectly. The notation was precise, clean, emotionally delicate. There was something familiar about the first bars, an echo of the melody she had played in her dream. She held the paper close to her chest. She brought it to the kitchen table and sat for hours, staring, touching, remembering, though not fully, not yet. By late evening, she opened her laptop and typed the name slowly. Andrew Whitmore, composer, musician, pianist, A. Whitmore. Nothing. No Spotify, no YouTube, no albums, no photographs. She scrolled deeper. Eventually, she found a local Arizona newspaper archive. There, buried in an old scan from 1989, young man missing after cliffside car accident near Highway 74. Authorities still searching. Name Andrew Whitmore, 28. Last seen leaving a piano recital at Verde Hall. Weather conditions that night were reported as stormy. The article included no photo, just a vague police sketch of a young man with medium-length hair and a calm expression. Her blood went cold. She sat back, eyes wide, staring at the screen. 1989? She murmured. But that's... She reached for the recorder again, hitting record with numb fingers.
Day 14. Evening. I found a score. A real one. The Sound of Blue. Signed by someone named A. Whitmore. I looked him up. Andrew Whitmore. He went missing 35 years ago in a car crash. And I think I know him. I just don't know how. She didn't call her daughter. She didn't know what to say. Melissa would only tell her to rest, take her medication, go for a walk. The truth was, Eleanor felt more awake now than she had in years. That night, she sat down at the piano again. The keys were slightly out of tune. She hadn't played since Melissa moved the instrument in for her 2 Christmases ago. She placed the sheet music on the stand. Her fingers hovered. And then, slowly, she began to play. The melody came like breath. Her hands didn't hesitate. The notes fell into place exactly where they should. Muscle memory, but deeper. It was like she wasn't playing it for the first time, like she had known this song longer than she'd known her own reflection. By the end, her cheeks were wet with tears she hadn't felt fall. She pressed the recorder. I played it. The Sound of Blue. Every note. My hands didn't falter once. I think I've played it before. A long time ago. A long silence. Then, softer. Andrew, who were you to me? The dreams deepened. In them, the candlelit room felt more real than her house. She began to notice small details. A clock on the wall that always read 9:42. A chipped saucer on the windowsill. The faint scent of lavender in the air. The man, Andrew, was it? Stood closer now. Sometimes he turned to her mid-song and whispered something she couldn't quite hear. Other times he said nothing at all, and they simply played. The joy was still there, but underneath it, something else. Grief. An undertone she couldn't name. One night, Eleanor stayed awake until 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that the past wasn't just knocking, it had already walked in. She called the local library the next morning and asked for archival access. I'm looking for any music recitals that took place at Verde Hall, 1980s. particularly 1988 or 89. The librarian promised to call back. Meanwhile, Eleanor began to catalog the tapes. Her audio journals were becoming more than therapy. They were a map, a breadcrumb trail. She labeled them Day 1, Rain and Nameless Music. Day 3, The Chopin Tears. Day 7, His Voice in the Dream. Day 10, The First Time I Laughed. And Day 14, The Name That Never Was. And now, Day 17, The Phantom in the Room. She held the cassette in her hand, stared at it. Then she recorded, "If I forget again, if my memory fades completely, I hope I find this one. This is the one where everything started to feel real." Her eyes found the sheet music again, open on the stand. She whispered into the mic, "Andrew, did I know you? Did I love you?" The tape clicked. Silence returned to the house. But in the corner of her study, a sliver of golden light fell across the floor, exactly like candlelight.
My name is Eleanor. I used to be a pianist. At least, that's what I remember. I opened the window just enough to let the late autumn breeze in. The leaves in the garden outside stirred like whispers of a life I couldn't quite touch. I sat in my chair by the piano, that same chair worn at the edges, the cushion faded and sagging beneath years of use, or maybe it was just old like me. There were things I remembered clearly. The way the keys felt under my fingers, the calluses I used to have, the sense of weightlessness when I performed on stage. I remembered Paris, the smell of warm croissants near Rue de Rivoli, my teacher's hands always gesturing mid-air like he was shaping invisible music, the cold marble floors of the conservatory. But there was a hole, a dark, hollow pocket between 1987 and 1990. A black curtain drawn tight. When I asked the doctors about it years ago, they called it selective memory loss from trauma. The kind of phrase that sounded too clinical for something so deeply personal. Apparently, I had suffered a concussion from a minor accident, though no one could say for sure what it was, not even me. I never told Claire, my daughter, how much that void haunted me. She thought I was just forgetful, scatterbrained. She joked once that she got her attention span from me. I laughed with her, but I never told her that I feared I'd forgotten someone. Tuesday, 11:41 a.m. I went to the store today. I saw an old friend, and she remembered more about me than I did. Her name was Lorraine. We'd studied together briefly in Paris, both foreign students with a shared love for Chopin and too much wine. I hadn't seen her in 30 years, and yet she recognized me instantly at the flower stall. She said, "Eleanor? Mon Dieu, it's you!" I blinked, stunned, struggling to place her. She hadn't changed much, though her hair was now gray, like mine, but her smile was the same, full of music and mischief. We had coffee at a small cafe tucked into a street corner. It felt like sitting across from a mirror,
I didn't remember being part of. You were writing something back then. That piece, what was it called? She closed her eyes, thinking. The sound of something. It was so lovely. You said it was for someone. A man, I think. Your heart was a mess at the time. My breath stopped. The sound of blue, I whispered. Her eyes lit up. Yes, that was it. You played it for me one night, said it was a gift, though you wouldn't say for who. Do you remember his name? She shook her head gently. No, you never told me, but you looked different. In love, but also sad, like you already knew it wouldn't last. I stared into my coffee until it went cold. That night, I sat by the window and wept, not because I remembered, but because I didn't. I didn't want someone to have lived in my heart and then vanished. I didn't want my own mind to have betrayed love. Wednesday, 8:22 p.m. I dreamed of Paris last night, but not the one I know. In my dream, the sky was pink and dusky, and the Seine shimmered like liquid glass. I was sitting on a park bench, wearing a blue dress I didn't own anymore. There was someone beside me. I didn't see his face, but I could hear the laughter. I felt it vibrate through my chest like the low notes of a cello. We talked without words. He reached out and touched my hand, and I looked down. There, in his palm, was a folded piece of paper. When I opened it, it read, "Don't forget the music." I woke with my pillow damp from tears. The sound of the dream still lingered, like a melody stuck just behind my ears. I opened the piano and placed my fingers on the keys. They felt like they belonged there. Without thinking, I began to play The Sound of Blue for the first time in decades. Not from memory, but from something deeper, something in the body, in the bones. The notes came slowly at first, then faster, as though the music was remembering itself through me. I closed my eyes and let it happen. My hands weren't as steady as they once were, but they knew where to go. Somehow they knew. Thursday, 1:14 p.m. I saw the girl I used to be, and I didn't recognize her. I went through old photo albums, the ones Claire hadn't taken yet. Buried between worn pages and brittle Polaroids, I found a picture from 1986. I was standing on a narrow street in Paris, holding a paper cone of roasted chestnuts. My smile was wide, almost too big for my face. My eyes were young, reckless, curious. I flipped the photo over, scribbled in ink, faint but legible, "Before the blue." I didn't remember writing that. There were other photos, some of me performing at a piano competition, some taken backstage. One picture showed a bouquet of flowers at my feet. The note on the bouquet was blurred and torn at the corner, but the name signed below was clear. A. Whitmore. My heart clenched. My hands trembled. Andrew Whitmore. Why did his name make my chest ache? Why had I forgotten him?
Friday, 10:05 p.m. I played it again tonight. For him, for the ghost of a name my mind erased. The sound in the room was soft and full, like breath, like memory. The piano responded to my fingers like an old friend slowly waking up. I had closed the curtains, lit a single candle. The rest of the world felt too loud. But here, in the glow and shadow, I felt safe enough to play. No sheet music in front of me, no plan, just the pull of the past humming low under the surface. The sound of blue was not a sad song. Not really. It was delicate, gentle, like first love or the moment before a goodbye. It didn't weep, it whispered. And somewhere between the second and third refrain, I remembered something. Not a memory, not quite, but a sensation. A weight on my shoulder, a hand over mine, laughter in my ear, someone humming along beside me. My fingers slowed, the candle flickered. Had I played this as a duet? Was that why it never felt quite complete? Saturday, 2:18 a.m. I think he loved me. I think I loved him too. And I forgot. I don't want to forget again, not even if it hurts. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the piano, watching the moonlight crawl across the floor, and asked the air, "Andrew, did I lose you, or did you lose me?" No answer came. Only the ticking of the clock. Only the faint sound of waves crashing from the audio tape I'd recorded last week. But I could still feel him. Somewhere between memory and music, he was there, and I was still trying to become the girl I used to be, the girl who remembered him, not just in fragments, but in full. The house had never been particularly loud, but now, in the hush of late afternoon, it was unnervingly quiet. Too quiet, Eleanor thought, as if even the walls were waiting for something to be said. So she began to talk. Not out loud at first, just little phrases in her head. If you were here, you'd laugh at the way I burn the toast every morning. You always said I needed a timer. Then she did speak. She sat on the armchair across from the empty piano bench and hit record on her voice memo app. She cleared her throat, hesitated, then started. "Andrew, it's strange, isn't it? Talking to someone I might have made up, but you feel real. You always have." There was no reply, of course, but she continued, her voice almost maternal, almost romantic. "I remember you standing by that coastal road, wind in your hair, like a scene from one of those French films we used to pretend to hate, but secretly adored. Did you say goodbye, or did I just leave?" Each day that followed, Eleanor recorded another piece, sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes an hour. She played both roles, herself and the echo of a man named Andrew, She gave him a soft, kind voice, a little teasing, a little older than her. "You told me to go to Paris, and I did. I did, Andrew. But you never wrote. Or maybe you did, and I forgot. Did I forget you? Or did the world erase you before I had the chance to hold on?" One day, during playback, she noticed something odd. There was a moment, about 16 minutes in, where she was silent, but the audio wasn't. It looped, over and over. "Andrew, Andrew, Andrew." Her own voice, whispered in sleep. The phone had picked it up from her bedside table. She stared at the waveform, then played it again, louder this time. "Andrew, please don't go." Her breath caught. That voice wasn't performing, it was pleading, raw, wounded. The next morning, the rain came early, gentle, like memory returning in pieces. Eleanor opened every window in the house, letting the scent of wet earth roll in. She sat at the piano bench, pressed record again, and rested her fingers on the ivory keys. She began to play The Sound of Blue. The notes came slower than usual, but more certain. Each keystroke had weight. As the rain tapped on the glass and her tears fell silently onto her lap, the melody filled the room, a room that felt less empty now, less abandoned. That night, for the first time, the dream was almost too clear. The same room from before, the candle-lit walls, the small bench. She was younger, maybe 25, wearing a red scarf she'd nearly forgotten existed, and he was there. Not clearly, his face was still soft, fading at the edges, but his presence was like gravity, real, warm. He reached across the piano, their fingers touched, and together they played, 4 hands, 1 song. When she woke, the name Andrew was still in the air, not spoken, not imagined, but remembered. Who was Andrew Whitmore really? What else is Eleanor's memory hidden behind locked doors? A forgotten photograph sparks more than just memory. It opens the path to a truth long buried. The newspaper felt cold in her hands, like it had waited too long to be read. Eleanor adjusted her reading glasses and stared at the yellowing front page of the Seaside Herald, dated March 21, 1989. The ink had faded in parts, but the headline still pressed into her skin like a bruise. Car plunges off Ocean Cliff Drive. 1 presumed dead, 1 survives. The survivor, whose name has been withheld, is in stable condition. Authorities say cause of the crash is under investigation. The driver of the vehicle remains missing, presumed deceased. There was no picture, no mention of who they were, where they were going, or why they had been on that dangerous stretch of road near the cliffs. Just a time, a place, and the phrase, "One survives," repeating in her mind like a tolling bell. She ran her fingers along the margin of the article, as if the texture of the page might whisper something the words refused to. The article felt like a confirmation of something she had only dared to suspect. Her dreams, no, memories,
had sharpened over the last few days. Not entirely clear, not linear, but recurring like storm patterns. The smell of wet leather, the slam of a door, the finality in a man's voice she could almost name. Andrew. Always that name, always followed by silence. The drive to Ocean Cliff Road was longer than she remembered. Highway 1 snaked along the edge of the Pacific, winding between thickets of pine and bare rock, and the ocean stretched beyond like a quiet witness. It was late afternoon when Eleanor pulled the car to the side of the road. The old turnoff wasn't marked anymore. Overgrown, cracked asphalt leading nowhere, but she knew this place, not from maps, from the echo inside her. Stepping out, her shoes crunched over gravel. The wind was stronger here, sharper. It carried salt and memory. The grass on the cliffside had grown wild, untamed by time or tourists. She walked toward the edge. The sea roared beneath, relentless and blue. Waves slammed against the rocks with a violence that felt too personal. Her lips parted without permission. Andrew! The wind caught the name and flung it into the abyss. There was no answer. Of course not. But the sound of her own voice saying his name aloud, without hesitation, broke something open inside her. She knelt by the rusted guardrail, closed her eyes, and let the images come. They were arguing. Not yelling, but sharp, desperate, intimate. The kind of argument you have only with someone who knows you too well. She had one hand on the door handle of the car. It was raining, hard. The windshield wipers moved like panicked metronomes. Music still played. Soft piano, too gentle for the storm outside. He said, "You don't have to leave." She shook her head. "I do, Andrew. You always run when it gets real. Don't run from this." She looked at him, really looked. The way his hands tightened on the steering wheel, the way his jaw set like stone, trying to stay calm. He said, "I got the letter. I leave Monday." "You said we'd figure this out together." "I can't stay for maybe, Andrew. I need something that doesn't disappear when it gets inconvenient." He opened his mouth, closed it. The pause stretched between them. Then, "I love you." That stopped her hand for a beat. But she still opened the door. The wind and rain blasted in. "Then let me go."
A jolt. The tires lost grip. A scream, not hers. The world flipped, steel bending, glass shattering, a rush of water, darkness swallowing light. Then pain and silence. Eleanor gasped, hands clutching the damp soil beneath her. The memory left her breathless, not just from the fall, but from what it revealed. She hadn't just been in the crash. She had chosen to walk away from him, from love, from the moment that changed everything. And she had forgotten, or had been forced to forget. The hospital report had been brief, impersonal. Concussion, possible retrograde amnesia.
No next of kin identified. Her mother had signed the discharge forms. I remember lying in a white bed, her head bandaged, eyes scanning the ceiling for clues to who I was. No one had mentioned Andrew, not once. They had protected her, or hidden the truth. She got back into her car, hands trembling as she pulled the door shut. Her reflection in the rearview mirror looked like someone else's face. Older, yes, but now lined with the unmistakable grief of rediscovered loss. That night, back in her apartment, Eleanor sat in front of her old cassette recorder. She didn't touch the piano. Not yet. She pressed record. I remember now. Not everything, but enough. She closed her eyes. We argued. I hurt you. I left. Then the crash. You were gone. A pause. I wasn't the only survivor, but they let me live like I was. The recorder whirred softly, waiting. She didn't cry. Not this time. I wonder if someone decided it was better if I forgot you. Maybe they thought it would spare me, or maybe it was easier for them. She leaned back in the chair, head tilted toward the ceiling. I didn't forget you because I didn't love you. I forgot because something stole you from me and left me the shell. Outside, the rain started again. She pressed stop. Later, she searched her drawers for the photo albums from her Paris years. Dusty, untouched. She flipped through black and white prints of cafes, concert halls, city lights, but no faces that matched him. Not one. Either he hadn't come to Paris, or he had, and she had scrubbed him from the narrative. But in the back of the album, tucked behind a postcard, was a folded note in her own handwriting. 4 words. Ink smudged by time. Forgive me for leaving. No name, no date, just that. She ran her fingers over the paper as if pressing could bring back time. Andrew, where are you? That night, her dreams didn't fade when she woke. She saw him, standing by a car, soaked in rain, eyes desperate, and she heard the sound of piano in the distance. Not hers, his. She bolted upright. She had never asked, could he play too? Had it always been a duet? In the morning, Eleanor went to the piano. She didn't hesitate. She didn't check the sheet music. She played The Sound of Blue. Not the polished, trained version, but the raw one, the way her hands remembered from years before. Halfway through, she added something, a second line, a harmony. It didn't come from memory. It came from somewhere deeper. And for the first time in weeks, she smiled through her tears. It was a duet, always had been. The last page of the Seaside Herald had a classified ad, seeking witnesses to crash on Ocean Cliff Drive, March 1989. Any information appreciated. Email andrew.soundmemory@gmail.com. She stared at the name, and something in her chest cracked wide open. I didn't forget you, Andrew. I was just never given the chance to remember.
The hall was small, nothing more than the community auditorium tucked behind the old church. But it held a warmth that no concert venue in Paris ever did. Wooden floors worn soft by decades of footsteps, folding chairs that creaked under the weight of people and memories. And on that particular evening, a silence that pressed gently on my chest like an old friend's hand. I hadn't advertised it much, a few flyers on the post office board, one soft announcement at the local cafe over herbal tea and a reluctant smile. Just a little something, one last time, I'd said. They came anyway. Neighbors who had once seen me walk to the market with the scarf wrapped around my head and music sheets spilling from my tote. The librarian who used to slip me out-of-print recordings. Even old Mr. Handley, who'd given up climbing the community stairs years ago, was helped to the front row. I wore midnight blue. No sequins, no jewelry, just a small brooch, silver, worn, pinned near my heart. I don't even know where it came from, only that I've always had it. It was his, I think, or mine from when we were still us. The grand piano had been borrowed from a nearby college. It smelled faintly of varnish and eucalyptus, and when I pressed a few keys to warm my fingers, it answered me like it knew this was no ordinary performance. I didn't speak into the microphone. There was no program, no intermission, no encore. Just one piece, one memory, one long note stretched out across the years. I began to play The Sound of Blue. At first, my hands trembled, the weight of the silence in the room, the finality. But as the opening notes unfurled, they took something with them. My breath, perhaps. My fear. The years. I don't know. And then, he was there. He didn't walk in, he didn't rise from the audience or step out from behind a curtain. He simply existed, like a breeze that had always been in the room but only just now touched my skin. Andrew, standing beside the piano, just as he used to in that little practice room in Marseille. Arms folded, lips curled into the quiet smile that always made me forget my own name. Watching me, not just with his eyes, but with something else. Something heavier, older. He didn't speak, didn't need to. I kept playing. I had feared that I would cry, that the grief would choke the keys or make my hands falter. But what came instead was something different. Peace. Not the kind that comes with forgetting, but the kind that arrives after you finally remember. I don't know how long I played. The piece in its full form is just under 8 minutes. But to me, time folded in on itself. I was 25 again, and then 60, and then 25 once more. I was all versions of myself collapsing into the single truth I had buried for too long, that I had loved him, and that I still did. When the final note hung in the air, I didn't let it fade too quickly. I held the pedal as if pressing it could hold back everything I had been running from. The silence that followed was not applause, not quite. It was something more sacred, reverent. A collective breath held, afraid to disturb whatever had just passed through the room. I stood slowly. My knees weren't what they used to be, but in that moment, they held me like they knew this mattered. I looked to my right. He was gone. Just the faint scent of rain and sea air left behind. I didn't bow, didn't turn back. I walked off the stage, my heels tapping softly on the wooden floor, the same way they had the day I left for Paris all those years ago. Back then, I didn't look back either. Only this time, it wasn't because I was afraid. Earlier that day, I had gone to the florist that morning, unsure why. My fingers hovered over lilies, then tulips, then settled, almost of their own accord, on a small bouquet of blue hydrangeas. I held them to my nose and closed my eyes. Blue for memory, or so my grandmother used to say. I smiled. Yes, that feels right. I left the flowers in the dressing room beside a cassette player I dug out of storage. I didn't know if anyone still made tapes, but I had one, labeled only "For Later." His handwriting. I never played it. Until now. I pressed play, the hiss of old tape, then his voice. Eleanor, if you're listening to this, I guess you chose to keep going. That's good. That's what I wanted. I sat very still. His voice was older than I remembered. Not in years, just in weight, in knowing. I wanted to tell you that I never blamed you. Not for leaving, not for forgetting. I always knew your music would take you somewhere I couldn't follow. I just didn't know it would take you away from me entirely. The tape clicked, then silence. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but there was something strangely satisfying in hearing him say what I had imagined for decades. A strange relief in the pain. I carried that with me onto the stage.
After the performance, the town went back to its routine, as small towns always do. Mrs. Redmond told me the performance was like listening to a prayer. Someone left a note in my mailbox. I didn't know music could remember things we forgot. The piano was picked up the next day. I left the hall with my hands tucked into my coat and my heart, for once, not pulling in two directions. Back at home, I made tea, chamomile and rosemary. I sat by the window, watching the last of the leaves tumble down the quiet street. And then the dreams returned, only this time they were different. No longer just fragments. There he was, laughing, brushing snow off my coat, handing me a notebook filled with scribbled melodies. He wasn't always speaking. Sometimes we just sat by the fire. Sometimes we argued. But always he was there. Memory isn't a vault, after all. It's a river. And mine had just remembered how to flow again. 3 weeks later, I walked to Ocean Cliff Drive. No audience this time. No piano. Just the sea wind tearing softly at my scarf. I stood by the barrier, newer now, with stronger bolts, where it had happened, where we'd last argued, where I lost everything. I closed my eyes and let the gusts wash over me. I whispered, I still can't remember everything. And in my mind, his voice answered, not an echo, but something deeper. You don't have to. I stayed until the sky turned that deep indigo only winter evenings know. Then I turned home, closing reflection. There's a kind of love that doesn't fade with time, only softens. It becomes part of your gait, the way you stir your tea, the way your fingers hesitate an extra moment on a piano key. I don't know what comes next. I don't need to. I had my last performance, but not my last memory. Not anymore. If this story stirred something in you, some forgotten name, a melody long unsung, maybe it's time to reach for it again. Not everything lost is gone forever. Sometimes it's only waiting for the right note to return. It was early spring when Clara found the recording. She had returned to her mother's cottage 2 weeks after the concert. The final performance everyone in town still talked about, with hushed voices, as if speaking too loudly might disrupt whatever magic had been conjured that evening. The house was just as Eleanor had left it. Music sheets gently curled on the piano stand, an old ceramic mug beside the windowsill, and the faint scent of sandalwood still clinging to the walls like memory. Clara had come alone this time. No husband, no children, just her and a quiet knowing. Her mother hadn't picked up the phone in 3 days, but there was no dread in her chest as she unlocked the door. Eleanor had always spoken of endings as inevitable as the last note of a song. You don't resist it, you let it ring out, and then you let it go. The bedroom door was half open. Clara stepped in softly. Eleanor lay curled slightly on her side, hair silver against the pillowcase, one hand resting gently on her chest. Her expression was peaceful. There was no sign of struggle, no final gasp, just stillness, and the smallest unmistakable curve of a smile on her lips. The house was so quiet. Clara thought she imagined it, but then she followed the faint, familiar static to the study. There, on the old desk, was her mother's recorder, still on, still warm. It had stopped mid-tape, blinking silently. Clara pressed rewind and waited. Then she pressed play. The first thing she heard was breath, shaky at first, then steadying, and then the voice. I am Eleanor Davis, and I loved a man named Andrew. Her mother's voice wasn't fragile. It wasn't strong either. It was honest, as though all the layers had been stripped back. Time, fear, confusion, and what was left was the raw thread of something elemental. I don't remember the exact shade of his eyes anymore. Isn't that strange? For years, they were the first thing I saw when I closed mine. And now, I only remember how it felt when he looked at me. The tape clicked lightly. Silence. Then, I felt like I belonged somewhere, like I was understood without needing to explain. A few soft notes of piano faded in. Clara recognized it immediately, the sound of blue. The way her mother played it was different than before, slower, more fragile. Each note felt like it was walking on glass, almost unsure whether it should exist. Clara closed her eyes. The funeral was held in the same town square Eleanor had played her final piece. People came not to mourn, but to listen. The mayor had arranged for her music to be played over the square's old speakers. There was no sermon, just the melody floating through the air like a farewell that didn't require words. Clara spoke only once. She stood where her mother had sat just days ago, glanced at the empty seat beside the piano, and said, "My mother never said goodbye. She believed in leaving when the music ended."
Then she stepped down and let the silence do what her mother had always trusted it to do, carry the rest. A few days later, Clara began sorting through the boxes. The attic was full of half-labeled tapes, notebooks, worn-down sheet music. She expected nostalgia. She did not expect the envelope. It was unsealed. Inside was a letter addressed to no one, or maybe to everyone. If someone finds this, then I am likely gone. I've spent the last years chasing echoes, sounds I thought were gone, faces I believed I had lost. But I see now, memory doesn't disappear. It softens. It becomes music. It becomes touch. It becomes instinct. Like when you hear a familiar tune and don't know why it makes you cry. Andrew was real. We loved. We argued. We held on to each other too tightly, and then we let go too soon. But he existed. And when I could no longer see his face clearly, I played him into existence. There was no signature, just one small line scrawled at the bottom. Love doesn't fade. It transforms. Clara folded the letter and tucked it inside her coat pocket. She didn't cry. Instead, she sat by the window and watched the sea shimmer under the late afternoon light. Outside, the breeze picked up. It swept through the trees, fluttered the curtains, and nudged the piano bench ever so slightly, as if something unseen had just taken its place.
A month later, Clara released the final recording. She didn't add music or effects, no editing, just her mother's voice, exactly as she'd left it. The podcast app called it Episode 12, The Memory That Stayed. Thousands listened, not because Eleanor Davis was famous, but because her voice reminded people of something they couldn't name, something they'd once felt in the quiet spaces between words, something about loss and the strange, beautiful ache of remembering love even when you can't remember the details. Clara ended the episode with a few words of her own. Sometimes the people we lose don't leave. They become the silence in our music, the warmth in the room, the reason we look at an empty chair and smile. Then, the screen faded to black. That night, in Eleanor's cottage, the recorder still sat on the desk. It had one final message, undated, untitled. Clara hadn't noticed it before. She pressed play. If this is the end, then let it be soft. Let it be rain on the roof, a minor chord on an old piano. Let it be the moment I said, I love you, without saying it. When I stayed. Andrew, I played for you all my life, even when I forgot who you were. But I never forgot how it felt to be yours. A soft breath, then that feeling is the memory that stayed. And then the music began. The sound of blue for the last time. Just one piano, no voice, just echo. The tape ended on the final note, and the recorder went silent. As the final note faded into silence, the screen lingered on Eleanor's empty chair, the one by the window where she used to sit, headphones on, eyes closed, reaching back into a memory only her heart remembered clearly. The recording had stopped. The room was quiet, but somehow the music still played, not through speakers, but in the space she had left behind. Outside, the rain began to fall, soft and steady, as if the sky was remembering with her. And in the distance,
barely heard, as if carried on the wind, a faint voice called her name, Eleanor. We forget names, we forget faces, we forget what day it happened or how long we cried. But love, real love, leaves echoes. Maybe not in words, maybe not in memory, but in music, it stays. If Eleanor's story touched something in you, a memory, a person, a note you once couldn't stop humming, don't let it fade. Share this story with someone you once loved or someone who helped you remember. Revisit the songs that made you feel alive. Tell me, what's your sound of blue? Drop it in the comments below. And if you're still listening, thank you for remembering with us. Because some melodies never die. They just wait to be heard again.